What's good, y'all? Welcome to Pretty Realist Podcast. It's the Film C. That's me, Shannon Nicole. Now let's get into this video. So today, I will be doing a reaction video. The crazy thing is how I came across this man, because I was having a discussion with my cousin, and it was really kind of more so of a debate. I wouldn't call it an argument. He's very much so a liberal, very, very much so a Democrat. This guy, he actually mentioned, and I had no idea who he was talking about. He actually came up in my news feed on YouTube. So I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and give it a try and check out what he's talking about. I came across this gentleman and I watched some of his videos, and I was a little thrown off that I never heard about him. You know, you hear about so many important Black authors and Black leaders who spoke up. So the man that I'm talking about today, his name is Thomas Sowell. He's an African-American economist. He's an author, social commentator. He of course, has been in the game for a long time. I think he's like 90 years old right now, and he's still writing books. He actually was a Democrat, which I didn't know based upon the information that he gives in a lot of his videos. He ain't for everybody.
Thomas Sowell is an influential African-American economist who is known for his controversial views on race, ethnicity, and social economic status. He is a conservative and very, very popular among white evangelical Christians. You see, Sowell believes disparities do not prove discrimination, particularly pertaining to Black and white economic inequality in the U.S. He also believes that Black Americans, especially the worst off living in urban centers, have a redneck culture that was handed down to them by white Southerners via Britain. This culture produces bad behavioral patterns such as crime and single parenthood. He also believes that these behavioral patterns are exacerbated by the interventions of the welfare state. He also believes that it is those behavioral patterns from the combination of culture and welfare that lead to the Black economic inequality. Sowell believes that Black people are blameworthy for their inequality-producing behavior. So you can see why we see so many right-leaning evangelical Christians largely celebrating this man and quoting him in discussions about racial inequalities. The man is anti-Black.
Girl, bye. Of course, you know, when it comes to certain melanated people, we don't want to hear anything other than Black empowerment, which is okay. But we also have to be very mindful about people who are race hustling us. And it's been going on for way too long. You know, I was very much so into the woke movement before it was handcuffed by the liberals to push a whole nother agenda aside from Black people being enlightened and actually doing the research about certain things that may be important to their growth. But at the same time, I got to this point where when I was living in the South, I also realized that like maybe a lot of what people been saying ain't really the truth, because why does it feel like we're still kind of stuck in the same position when we're supposed to be having all of these leaders that are supposed to be educating us and inspiring us to come together and unite? Why is it that every time I try to do business with another person of my own race, I feel like I get jerked around? Why is it so hard for me to get along with women who look like me? Why have I never experienced any type of racial discrimination on a regular basis in my everyday life? There was at one point where I thought I did have a situation, and I actually thought about it, and I was just like, no, I kind of really bought that shit on myself. Accountability, which is something else that we're going to be discussing with this video that I'm about to show you all. You'll be surprised, but a lot of what he's saying is actually true. And I didn't even have to go on Google to do the research. I actually called my elders and spoke to my aunties, and a lot of what they experienced around this time damn near kind of sound hand in hand to what he was speaking of. Without further ado, make sure you all like, share, comment, and subscribe. It helps me get up in the algorithm if you all just show me some love ahead of time, because listen, you all want to stick around for this video. The video is, I think it's like 11 minutes. I am not going to stop this video at all. I'm gonna let this thing play, and then I'll go ahead and I will give my my feedback and my personal opinion at the end of the video, because I really want y'all to pay attention to a lot of the stuff that he's saying. Make sure y'all fasten up, grab you a drink, put the kids to bed. Matter of fact, no, let the kids join. let them join in. If you got to roll you a little smoky smoke. So let's go ahead and get to it.
As of the early 19th century, residential segregation was just one of a number of restrictions placed on free blacks in both the North and the South. However, by the last decade of the 19th century, such residential restrictions had eroded in northern cities to the point where W.E.B. Du Bois could write in the 1890s of a growing liberal spirit toward the Negro in Philadelphia, in which the community was disposed to throw off the trammels, brush away petty hindrances, and to soften the harshness of race prejudice, leading, among other things, to blacks being able to live in white neighborhoods. Nor was Philadelphia unique. There were similar developments in New York, Detroit, Washington, and other northern cities. Census data show a lower rate of urban residential segregation of blacks nationwide in 1890 through 1910 than in later decades of the 20th century, and even as late as the 2010 census. Other restrictions had eroded as well. In Detroit, blacks who had been denied the vote in 1850 were voting in the 1880s, and in the 1890s, blacks were being elected to public office by a predominantly white electorate in Michigan. The black upper class in Detroit at that time had regular social interactions with whites, and their children attended high schools and colleges with whites. In Illinois during the same era, legal restrictions on access to public accommodations for blacks were removed from the law, even though there were not enough black voters at the time to influence public policy, so that this represented changes in white public opinion. In New York City, by the 1890s, most blacks did not work as unskilled laborers, but held modest but respectable jobs as barbers, waiters, caterers, and skilled craftsmen. Distinguished historian Oscar Handlin characterized blacks in New York at that time as being better off than the mass of recent white immigrants. The visible improvement in the living standards of blacks was noted in Jacob Riis's 1890 classic, How the Other Half Lives. In Philadelphia, blacks were among the leading caterers in the city, serving a predominantly white clientele. In Chicago, there were also successful black businesses serving a predominantly white clientele, and as late as 1910, more than two-thirds of the city's black residents lived in neighborhoods that were predominantly white. To maintain that residential and other racial restrictions on blacks were simply a matter of the predispositions of the white population, racism, immediately raises the question of why such predispositions should have changed so much during the course of the 19th century, and then changed back again drastically and within a very few years during the early 20th century. But this pattern of progress in race relations in northern urban communities during the 19th century, followed by retrogression in the early 20th century, followed again by progress in the latter part of the 20th century, is more readily understood in terms of causes other than pure subjective mood swings in the white population. In short, whether or not attitudes within the white population deserve the characterization of racism, a causal analysis of the major changes that occurred in residential and other restrictions on blacks cannot explain such changes by simply saying racism. Turning from the white population to the black population, we find developments that make the changing residential patterns explicable without resorting to inexplicable changes inside the heads of white people. Beginning at the beginning, African slaves were brought into American society at the bottom and concentrated in the South, a region with its own cultural handicaps that produced marked differences between the white populations of the North and South that many observers noted during the antebellum era. This meant that those blacks who came out of the South to live in northern cities would be very different in many ways from the white populations of those cities. The visible racial differences made blacks easy to identify and restrict. During the course of the 19th century, however, over a period of generations, northern blacks tended to acquire more of the culture of the surrounding white urban population of the North, just as other groups often have when living surrounded by a vastly larger population with a different culture and a higher socioeconomic level. By the end of the 19th century, this cultural assimilation had reached the point where racial barriers eased considerably in the northern cities, where the black populations of these cities were now predominantly native-born residents, rather than migrants from the South. This situation changed drastically, however, and within a relatively few years, with the mass migrations of millions of blacks out of the South beginning in the early 20th century. This not only greatly multiplied the black populations living in many northern cities, the newcomers were seen by both the pre-existing black populations and the white populations of these cities as creating greatly increased social problems, such as crime, violence, and offensive behavior in general. If these were mere prejudices, perceptions, or stereotypes in the minds of white people, as so many adverse judgments have been automatically characterized, why did the very same views appear among northern-born blacks at the same time? Where hard data are available, these data substantiate the pattern of behavioral differences between the pre-existing northern black populations and the newcomers from the South. In early 20th century Pennsylvania, for example, the rate of violent crimes among blacks from the South was nearly 5 times that among blacks born in Pennsylvania. In Washington, D.C., where the influx from the South occurred decades earlier, the effect of the Southerners' arrival could be seen decades earlier. For example, out-of-wedlock births were just under 10% of all births among blacks in Washington in 1878, but this more than doubled by 1881, following a large influx of Southern blacks, and remained high for years thereafter. The new majorities of Southern blacks in the northern black urban communities were sufficiently large, and their culture sufficiently reinforced by continuing new arrivals from the South, that their rate of assimilation to the cultural norms of the surrounding white society was neither as rapid nor as complete as that of the much smaller numbers of blacks who had preceded them in these cities in the 19th century. Moreover, as late as 1944, Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma pointed out that a majority of blacks living in the North at that time had been born in the South. During the early years of mass migration of blacks out of the South, many northern-born blacks condemned the Southern newcomers and saw in them a danger that the white population would put up new barriers against all blacks, which is in fact what happened. After the massive inflow of Southern blacks into northern cities, in which small black populations had once lived scattered in predominantly white neighborhoods, these now became cities in which blacks were prevented from living in white neighborhoods by methods ranging from legal prohibitions and restrictive covenants to outright violence. All this happened within a very few years of the mass migrations of Southern blacks to northern cities. The massive black ghettos, which became common in the 20th century, were just one aspect of a more general retrogression in race relations, in which various public accommodations once open to blacks were now closed to them, and black children who had once gone to schools with white children in northern cities were now segregated into different schools. The conclusion that this change was a reaction to a mass in-migration of less acculturated blacks from the South is reinforced by the history of cities on the West Coast, where this mass in-migration from the South took place decades later, largely during the Second World War, and was likewise followed by retrogressions in race relations there at this later time. A similar pattern had already unfolded among Jews in the United States in the late 19th century, when the highly acculturated German Jews lost much of the social acceptance which they had already achieved after larger masses of much less acculturated Jews from Eastern Europe arrived, followed by new barriers against Jews in general. To say that this retrogression was caused by antisemitism would likewise be to transform a characterization into a causal explanation, implicitly treating those adversely affected as abstract people whose problems originated solely in other people's minds. Whether among blacks, Jews, or others, leaders within these groups themselves saw behavioral problems among some of their own people as creating backlashes in the larger society around them, from which the entire group suffered. As a result, organized social uplift groups, both secular and religious, arose within the black community, the Jewish community, as well as within other communities, aimed at changing the behavior of members of their own respective groups in order to facilitate the advancement of these groups as a whole. Among Jews, during the era of mass immigration from Eastern Europe, the already acculturated German Jews living in America took the lead in seeking to acculturate the Jewish newcomers from Eastern Europe. A German Jewish publication of that era described the Eastern European Jews as slovenly in dress, loud in manners, and vulgar in discourse. As a leading study of American Jews noted, the Germans found it hard to understand what could better serve their ill-mannered cousins than rapid lessons in civics, English, and the uses of soap. Such problems were not peculiar to Jews, but were common among the Irish immigrants before them and to blacks after them. During the mass migrations of blacks out of the South during the early 20th century, both the Chicago Defender, a black newspaper, and the Urban League offered such published advice as, "Don't use vile language in public places. Don't throw garbage in the backyard or alley, or keep dirty front yards. Do not carry on loud conversations in streetcars and public places." Although these efforts produced positive results over the years, whether among blacks, Jews, or others, that whole approach was antithetical to a new social philosophy that emerged in the late 20th century: multiculturalism.
Did you get that? I'm trying to gather my thoughts. What's so crazy about this video is that this can apply to what's going on today. We already know that there are a lot of immigrants here in America that have been here for generations. A lot of them may very well have come over here illegal, but a lot of them went through the process of becoming legal. A lot of them have also, built families, have built businesses, and reside in neighborhoods where people of all cultures live at. We're starting to see this influx of all of these other immigrants from other countries who didn't have nothing before they came over here, who may have faced some very harsh realities, who we have no idea why they're coming over here, but it seems as if they are being assigned to certain places in our country, making them a little uneasy. And I could see why.
But I'm a father. I'm not a politician. I've never asked for your vote. And I'm concerned about the world that I'm going to live my daughter. I have family from Medellin, Colombia, who has filed legal immigration petitions 7 years ago. They've been waiting in their respective country 7 long years. They're getting trampled by these migrants coming across there. Illegal aliens. Stop calling them migrants. Call them out what they are. Illegal aliens. Like I said, there isn't one racist bone in my body. There isn't one racist bone. I'm fluent in Spanish. My daughter is half Colombian. But this is wrong.
You have people who have literally pulled themselves up by the bootstrap, building legacies for generations for their families, but they took time to learn the language. They have, contributed to going to school and doing things to better themselves and become American citizens. And now you have all of these people over here who are getting all of this special treatment, and not only are they abusing the treatment that they're getting, they're abusing the law enforcement. They're being disrespectful and rude, and they're completely trashing the streets where they're at. So just imagine if somebody just completely just dumped a whole bunch of trash on your front lawn out of nowhere. You would feel some type of way. That's how I believe blacks in this time felt. I did my research. I did a little Google and everything, and I couldn't really find a lot. I wanted to speak to my elders and really get some information from them, because one thing about, searching for information on the internet, a lot of it could be, a little bit not correct. So I contacted my auntie, and I also contacted my cousin. Now, my auntie, this is my great auntie. This is my mom's auntie, meaning this is her father's sister. She was also born in the 30s. She actually was born in Gary, Indiana, but her family, before they moved, they were actually living in Pittsburgh. Now, my grandmother, their family actually, they came from Mississippi and they ended up migrating to Chicago. And my grandmother, of course, she ended up moving to Gary, which is where she raised my mom and my aunties, my uncle, as well as myself and my brother. But I wanted to honestly talk to them and ask what life was like for them growing up. Did they face the racism, the segregated neighborhoods, the segregated schools? And I was extremely shocked by what they told me. And then I always kind of wondered, like, there was a period where African Americans were doing very well for themselves, and this was after slavery. We saw it. We read about it. We read about W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. You know what I mean? We knew about Madam C.J. Walker. There was a period where African Americans were thriving, but then there's this period where there's this long pause, and it could have been during the Great Depression, and it just seems like the entire energy of Black America just changed. It's like we went from high society, and then all of a sudden, boom, now we are in the ghettos. And of course, you know, Jim Crow's been around since the late 1800s, but it didn't stop Black people from prospering. So I was so interested in knowing, like, what happened. My auntie told me that her father, he was able to support 8 children by working in a steel mill. This was like in the early 1900s in Pittsburgh, and he ended up moving to Gary because they had built a mill in East Chicago. So his job allowed him to transfer and move to Gary, and that's where my grandparents met. Now, my grandmother, I wish she was here, but I can't ask her the questions that I want because she's been dead for quite some time. So I had to go to my cousin. Also told me that, like, they were indentured servants, which is kind of like a fancy way of really kind of saying slave, but not really. They came from Ireland and ended up connecting with Choctaw Indians, and that's how our family kind of breeded and were born, and this is who we are today. We have been watching our parents, our grandparents, some of us, not all, have been watching them, you know, be able to live through all of these harsh periods in America, but they've been able to survive and strive and still have homes and still, you know, create businesses that they may have been able to pass on to generations. A lot of us didn't really have that opportunity, but one thing we did learn is about hard work ethic. She was a single parent with 2 kids. None of our fathers were there. She was also on welfare, but she managed to pull herself up out of that. Luckily, she found someone, got married, and they've been married for 30 years. But now we still have this place where there are so many Black women who are okay with just accepting government assistance, not really pulling themselves up out of it. I get it if you're just starting out, you just have a child, you're just, getting the gist of trying to be an adult and you need a little assistance, that's fine. But when you got people that's been on government assistance for like 25 to 30 plus years, they're not doing anything to pull themselves up out of it, that is the problem.
What the welfare system and other kinds of governmental programs are doing is paying people to fail. Insofar as they fail, they receive the money. Insofar as they succeed, even to a moderate extent, the money is taken away. This is even extended into the school systems, where they will give money to schools with low scores. Insofar as the school improves its education, the money is taken away, so that you are subsidizing people to fail in their own private lives and become more dependent upon the handouts. Gutman has done a study of the Black family, showing that this whole notion that the Black family has always been disintegrating, that is nonsense, that his studies go up to 1925, the great bulk of Black families were intact, 2-parent families up through 1925, and going all the way back through the era of slavery. So it is now only within our own time that we suddenly see this inevitable tragedy, which the welfare system says it's going to rush in to solve.
Now, Black women are they hold the record for 57% of single parent homes in this country. Hispanics at 31.2%, you got whites at 20.7%, and then you have Asians with the lowest rate. So where is it that we could kind of get in our minds that at this point, it's no longer a race issue. It's all about class. It's all about you being able to hustle, grind, make some shit happen, build a legacy for your kids. Start something if you know for sure you don't have a job, create a job. I really be respecting people out here who really be like, yo, I can't find a job right now, so let me figure out how I'm gonna hustle in order for me to do what I gotta do, whether it's gonna be Uber Eats, whether it's gonna be selling plates. I mean, whatever I gotta do, but they don't stay there. Eventually they realize that at some point I gotta be able to cut the umbilical cord with the government. Because what is going to happen if we continuously have all of these women, and I'm not talking about just black women, I'm talking about all of these women who only depend on the government assistance to take care of their families for so long until the government be like, you know what, this is what's about to happen now. You've been on this too long. We about to cut it down. We got all of these people that just came over here. Now we got to take care of them. What can you do? What can you say? Argue with the government? You're going to be mad, frustrated? The only person you could be frustrated with is yourself for you not allowing yourself to do something other than sit on your ass and continue to collect government assistance. Did you apply for school? Did you see what other jobs you could get into? Because if you have kids, of course, you don't want them to go through what you went through. So at some point, we have to wake up and realize that we are either our best friends or we're our worst enemy. We can't keep pointing fingers and saying that the white man did this, white man did that. We gotta look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, okay, what did I contribute to the downfall of my community? At some point, our ancestors were doing good. They had businesses, they had homes, they had jobs, they were able to support their families. We had 2-parent households. Women held their head up high, got out here in the world and made something for themselves. Even if they were single parents, they made something for themselves. And not at the expense of feeling as if they didn't need a man there, because even Madam C.J. Walker tried to get married at least 3 or 4 times. She knew that she needed a man, but she also stayed focused on her business. She was somebody who pulled herself up by the bootstraps. She didn't depend on the government to take care of her, because she was one of them people that migrated from the South, came to the North, kind of had to hustle her way up, took $1 and some change and created a business. She built her business out of struggle. It took for her to go through something in order for her to come up out of it. That's kind of where I feel like America is at right now. We got to make it a priority to figure out how we're going to pull ourselves up out of it without the government helping us. Because as you can see, they're committing treason right now by just violating our rights and allowing all of these people to come over here without even knowing what they're going to bring and contribute to society here. And I believe that this actual video here, it really kind of shows the disconnect that we have with each other. Check this out.
We can't help anyone else until we help ourselves. The Negro has had 2 professions, his own medicine, dentistry, law, psychiatry, and he's had the profession of being a Negro. And many of us have come out here to escape from this second profession of being a Negro. And we're out here a while and we're working in our own field, and then we find out that here these same problems are falling on the heels of 1,600 Negroes a month that come into Los Angeles. Now this gives us problems. It's our own view. It's our own identifying with these Negroes that are coming in with their carpetbags that causes us problems.
This is a basic embarrassment that we as Negroes have. We want to live together, yet we want to sort of scatter to the far winds and live amongst white people. We are brought up in terms of this, that to have a dark skin, to be a Negro, there is something wrong with it. And if you take a child and raise him, a very impressionable child, and have him grow up in an atmosphere where your color of skin is something that is looked down upon, that there is something wrong with you, that you are not, you don't have the abilities of other people. Even no matter how much education, no matter how much training, etc. you have, a lot of these impressions stay with you. I feel that we have to search for a new image.
When I wake up in the morning, I don't look in the mirror and say, you are a Negro, therefore you will face life in a certain way. I see myself as a person just like all the people that I work with and the children that I deal with, and they're all people.
All you got is black people on here calling them Uncle Toms and saying that this and that they that and this is sad and da and pa. Like, let's keep it a buck. Can you really blame them? They were able to coexist, and they didn't have any violence. They didn't have any issues in their neighborhoods. And all of a sudden, we got all of these people that's coming up here that's destroying our neighborhoods. How you think they supposed to feel? Because I know for sure, I'm not saying that I live in the most expensive neighborhood in this city, but I stay in a pretty decent area. We don't really have a lot of that rah-rah going on over here. So yes, we don't want none of that rah-rah going on over here. A lot of us work very hard to get to where we are right now, and the last thing that we need is somebody coming over here trashing up our neighborhood, having block parties and leaving bottles and broken bottles all over the place. This is by no means disrespect to the South of today, but we got to also understand that, you know what I mean, back in the day, it's just damn near kind of like somebody whose parents was extremely strict on them, aka slavery. They weren't able to do anything but follow the orders of someone who was abusing them. And then all of a sudden they cut loose, they cut free, but they still don't have much so they could really pull themselves up. And then all of a sudden they get to this freedom. How do you think they're going to be able to handle it? It should have been a slow process, but it wasn't. It was kind of really like the same thing that's happening right now. They dumped all of these southern migrants in northern cities. Still racism up that way, but the KKK was formed in Tennessee. It wasn't formed in any northern cities. A lot of that ideology, that racism that was taking place down there in the South, it literally followed these people. These people were battered and angry and you know, abused by the system that they went through down there. And here you are, you come up here and you see all the pearly gates of other black people living good. Not saying it's right, but how you expect for them to act? So a lot of this, you know, contributes to the fact that we all got to start taking accountability for how we present ourselves to the world. We can't just sit around and keep expecting the government to save us, because that's not even the case no more. And at this point, even as black people, we got to also understand that there was a point where we were able to coexist with white people and it was peaceful. My auntie told me when she was living in Gary, Indiana, she had white neighbors. They used to play with the little girl. At one point in history where we were able to coexist, and we're coexisting right now. So many people out here who have, you know, partners of different ethnic backgrounds and have children who are mixed. So us segregating, that ain't really, you know what I'm saying, that ain't really gonna work right now. What is we supposed to do? 9 times out of 10, most of the black people out here that we thinking is gonna save us, they ain't doing nothing but hustling us right now.
Have you ever noticed, and don't lie to yourself, because we were talking about this in the back. In order for us to get in a better place, we have to talk about the uncomfortable shit.
That part.
We fucked up. Psychologically, we fucked up. So in saying that, watch this. Watch this. The people who we give our money to, even think about the so-called woke movement. I think it's so much bullshit. And I'm going to tell y'all why. The motherfuckers that's been down for y'all, look at how y'all treat Nice Cube, fucking Talib Kweli, David Banner, Big Boy, all the motherfuckers who was woke early. Y'all don't fuck with them folks. You wait till your favorite artists get woke, and then you go to the same motherfuckers that you did in every movement. If a motherfucker is for dogs this day, for black power this day, and then fucking whatever else the next day, the motherfuckers ain't real, they changing in order to get your fucking bread. You don't go to the motherfucker that does it the best, and it don't make no sense. I know it's about money, but let me keep going.
Keep for real.
When I debate, I tell people all the time, I shouldn't be on TV debating. And people say, why are you so smart? I said, because have you ever noticed when I'm on CNN, they don't put me up against Chris Rock? Even though I've never lost the debate on CNN, I debate against white doctors, engineers, lawyers. I out-debated Congress. So my thing is, if we have been socially engineered into slavery, don't you think we need a fucking engineer to get us out and not no motherfucking rapper?
Umar Johnson, Tariq Nasheed. Brothers been laying down the foundation of black consciousness for a long time, and they have done nothing. We still waiting on Umar Johnson to build this school. If you don't believe me, you can look up the history of Tariq Nasheed. Yeah, he done dropped the Hidden Colors documentaries, and he might be doing a lot right now as far as, you know, having his radio show and everything. But like, let's be honest, has it really been helping us though? Meanwhile, you got people like Dan Calloway, who ain't nobody really heard of. This brother is speaking so much knowledge, but a lot of black folks ain't really trying to hear that. Want to continuously allow themselves to look as if they were just descendants of slaves, and bam, here we are. I refuse to only accept that narrative, which is why I'm going to do what I need to do in order to make sure that I continue to stay in contact with the people before me, so that way, if I know where I'm from, I know where I'm going. I'm not going to continue to allow the narrative of all white people hate me, and I need to hate all white people just because that's what history tells me to do. because I have a hard time believing that that is the case. We've come so far, but a lot of people still want to stay stuck where they at. Them the people that we might need to leave behind when it's time to really step up to the plate and protect our country. I'm not that one that's sitting here like, yo, I need to just go ahead and just pick up. I need to just go ahead and just pick up and just leave this country, you know, forget America. I don't need to be here anymore. Let me just go ahead and pack up everything and let me just move to Africa. I'm not doing that. For what? This is my country. This is your country. This is all you know. This is all I know. Obviously, it's something going wrong over there because, like I said in my other video, Africans is running over here. They're part of the migrants. So why would I even take my time to even go back into the arms of the same people that supposedly sold my ancestors? When shit hits the fan, how I know that they ain't gonna do it again? How I know that I'm gonna be comfortable with going over there? Nah, I'm not about to do all of that. This is where I'm at. And if it don't work out, then I guess I'll die here. And that's okay. Because I have family who fought for this country. I have family who built in this country, and I was born in this country. This is my country. I'm an American. I just happen to have brown skin. At the end of the day, me constantly holding on to a narrative about what was is not helping me to go forward and deal with what is. And that's the fact that there's a war on our progress, not only as a culture, but at this point, as a country. I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here though. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but I needed to get this off my chest because I'm serious, y'all. This migrant situation is blowing my mind right now because I never thought in a million years I would live to see something like this. I literally did a TikTok. Make sure you all follow me on TikTok at Pretty Realist. I'm trying to get 1,000. I need 1,000 followers because I really be wanting to go live. I had to literally pray the other day and ask for forgiveness from God because I know I'm not a racist person. I mean, I want everybody to be able to achieve greatness anywhere on this planet. For real, I do. It don't matter what color your skin is. But at the same time, the way that they're going about it is it has to be unconstitutional. This shit is illegal. All of these people that's just coming over here, and then there's certain things that they're leaving out in the news when it comes to this migrant crisis. So yes, it's been on my mind heavy on the track. I got friends, I got families that stay in Texas right now. I got a friend that stays in New York right now. I got friends that stay in Chicago and up near Chicago. Like I told you, like I'm from East Chicago and Gary area. So I know that if all of that is going on in Chicago, the migrants and everything else that comes with it ain't nothing but a hop, skip, and a jump over that street in order to get to them cities. I'm in a space where it's not a sanctuary city, but I know that there's one portion of this city where there are a lot of immigrants there. I don't know if they're legal. I don't know if they're illegal. They doing their own thing and they stay in their own business. So I don't know how they're going to feel about all of these people coming over here. We have no idea what that's going to bring. This was not in any kind of way to crap on people from the South at all. I lived in the South for 8 years. Like I just told you, my grandmother was raised down there. But it's just a way for you to understand that not all change is beneficial to the well-being of the citizens. Unless people are willing to come together to work together, we're gonna just create chaos. It's just gonna be chaotic. It's gonna be fighting, it's gonna be looting, it's gonna be violence. And I think that a lot of our grandparents and great-grandparents felt this way when they were faced with these people that came from the South. Even though they had the same skin complexion, they just had a different way of life. And that way of life brought a lot of hostility and chaos with it. It wasn't just black people, it was white people too. Like I said, the KKK was formed in Tennessee, yet somehow it managed to just spread all over the country. You got police officers, firefighters who are associated with this horrible white supremacist party. It needs to come together in order to unite. So I don't have a problem with immigration. They don't want us to unite. They don't want us to get along. They want us to be divided because when you divide a people, you conquer the people. I'm also going to leave the link to Thomas Sowell's video for you all to also check out more of his content. Listen. Don't shoot the messenger, me or Thomas, okay? Only receive the message. If it's for you, receive it. If not, leave it. Don't forget. Click that bell. Continue to support the channel. Listen, I appreciate you all for helping me grow. Listen, you all stay blessed, stay well. Peace.